Good morning, CSL Delaware. This month, our motto is Stepping into the Unknown, the Winds of Change. Dr. Ernest Holmes wrote, "Instead of being confused by the situations around us, we should be calm, tranquil, and confident that through reforming our word, we can as easily change the existing conditions as perpetuate them." Richard Rohr. I welcome all thoughts, feelings, emotions, persons, situations, and conditions. It is in these moments that we are broken open and can release the blockages in our lives. Otherwise, we hold on to them with resistance. Please join me in our affirmation. I am consciously aware of the presence of spirit. And now I would like to reintroduce and truly welcome the Reverend Dr. Judy Morley.
Thank you, Marcy. Wonderful. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to apologize in advance. One thing about Zoom, I have two unruly little dogs who are not at all trained. And even though I tried to boot them out of my office this morning, one of them snuck up here. So if you hear barking in the background, I'm just going to apologize in advance. I can't get her out or else she'll scratch up my door. So I just want to get that on the table. I know you guys all know what I'm talking about since you've been in Zoom meetings now for a year. Anyway, I am thrilled to be here. And thank you so much for having me and for having me for this fabulous topic, the winds of change. The winds of change. I love that. How many of you, when change comes at you like a freight train, how many of you stop and go, yay? How many? Anybody? Anybody? I see Tom, maybe a couple. You know, years ago when I was in ministerial school, we had to take a class in improv comedy, which sounds totally crazy, but they said that when you're a pulpit minister, you have to learn to think on your feet. I'm sure Dr. Kathleen gets that. And so we had to learn about improv comedy. And they tell you in improv that when you go onto the stage, you may think the scene is going to be one thing, but whoever you're on stage with may totally throw you a curveball that changes everything. And the only response you can have is, yay! We had to actually practice this in the ministerial class. We had to actually practice when the teacher would throw us a curveball, we had to say, yay! So for our final exam, she gave us a topic that we had to speak on like a Sunday service. And so it was something about love or abundance or healthy relationships or some Sunday service talk. And halfway through our talk, she rang a bell and she gave us a complete left turn. And we had to stop and go, yay! So when change comes, that's the attitude that we really need to have toward it. So many of us want to cling to the way things are. We get very comfortable. We get very steady in how we do things. I'm guilty of this. I love routine. I have many, many routines down to how I get ready in the morning, how I drive to work, how, all of these routines. And when our routines get messed up, we tend to get a little out of sorts. It kind of messes with our psyche. But if we can train ourselves to, when our routines get messed up, to greet it with this yay idea, we will be a lot more nimble and a lot more ready to grow. Because growth doesn't happen if there is no change. In my years as a minister, I would counsel with people and they would say, I want everything in my life to be different. I don't like my relationship. I don't have enough money. My health is suffering. I'm not fulfilled at my job. I want everything to be different. And when I would say, well, what are you willing to change to do that? They'd say, well, change? I can't change anything. Are you kidding me? Change is the only way that growth happens. So I'm thrilled about this topic also, because this is the first time I'm going to share this publicly, but I just signed a book contract with G&D Media. They're the people who publish many of the teachers from The Secret, including Bob Proctor and Joe Vitale, on a book on change called The Leadership Constant: Audacious Strategies for Navigating Change. So I love this topic, and I love that we are talking about it now 1 year after everybody's world completely changed with COVID. And we spent much of that year, I think nationally, grieving. And that is something that has to be done. But really, when change hits us, I like to think of kind of the nautical analogy. You know, we've got the winds of change, it makes sense. So if you're not someone who is immediately comfortable with change, if it's not something you initially love, if greeting it with a sound yay is something that's going to take some practice, I want to give you 3 steps that you can try to get a little more comfortable with change, because you know the only constant in life is change. So the first thing is find a tether. Find a tether. When the winds of change blow, find a tether. Now, the obvious thing to tether to is God. But I'm going to bring it down a little more concrete, because that's pretty abstract. Tether to God, of course. You guys have been coming to CSL Delaware for a while. I know there's practitioners and board members here on Zoom and on Facebook today. And so for a lot of you, that's like, well, duh, of course, we're going to tether to God. But I want to parse that down, because I think it's easy to say I'm going to tether to God. But how? How do we do that? What does that really mean? Are we waiting for something out there to come and scoop us up? You know, there's this great joke about a guy who's caught in a flood, and he climbs up to the roof of his house as the flood waters are rising, and along comes a police officer in a rowboat and says, "Come on, get in the rowboat." And the guy says, "No, no, no. I have put my faith in God. God is going to save me. God's going to save me. So I am going to wait for God." And then the next thing that happens is a group of neighbors come by, and they've kind of built a makeshift raft. And they come by as the waters continue to rise, and they come up to the guy and they say, "Here, give me your hand. I'll pull you over." And the guy says, "No, no, I'm waiting. God's going to save me. God's going to save me." And then finally a helicopter, the last ditch effort, as the water's risen over all of the roofs, and this guy is barely keeping his head above water. The helicopter comes and it throws down a line, and it says, they say, "Grab hold." And he says, "No, God's going to save me." And the water rises and he drowns. And he gets to the pearly gates and he says to God, "God, what happened? I thought you were going to save me." And God says, "What do you want? I sent you a boat, a raft, and a helicopter. Why didn't you use any of them?" That's not the kind of tethering I'm talking about. Is tethering to some abstract concept of God where we're waiting for something else to come and save us. We have to tether to that God life within each of us, the God life in each of you. We have to tether to our authentic selves. That authenticity in each one of us is the God life that we have to tether to when change comes. Everybody handles change differently. The winds of change blow from all directions, and some people are standing at the bow of the ship, loving the fact that it's blowing their hair back. And other people are downstairs in the hull cowering. That's okay. But the way we navigate it is we find what is authentically us. What is the thing that is most loving to me? And that's how I'm going to navigate this change. Not something I think I should do or think I shouldn't do, not what the media tells us to do, none of that. What is my authentic anchor that feels right to me? As an example of this, I'm going to use Oprah Winfrey. You guys all know Oprah, but I don't know how many of you remember all the way back to 1998. God, can you believe that was 23 years ago? That I'm getting old, but 1998. So Oprah Winfrey, got her start on the talk show circuit. She was an anchor person, and then she moved to Chicago, and she got this talk show called, I think it was called Chicago, AM Chicago, or Good Morning Chicago, something like that. And she became a talk show host, and then she got her own show, the Oprah Winfrey Show. She was one of a whole bunch of talk show hosts at the time. You guys remember Phil Donahue and Ricky Lake? And I mean, this was a big thing in the 90s. Well, starting at about 1994, this idea of trash TV came in with the advent of Jerry Springer. Jerry Springer came on, and he started having this dysfunctional television program. I don't know how many of you remember, but he would bring on, like, a wife and the husband, and then the husband would know that the wife was cheating on him, and then Jerry Springer would bring out the lover, and they'd get in fights and throw chairs, and it was really ugly. It was really ugly. And this went on for a number of years. Oprah Winfrey, in the meantime, her show moved a little bit toward this trash TV, not as much as some of the competitors like Ricky Lake and Jerry Springer and Rosie O'Donnell, not as much, but a little bit toward that trash TV. And then in 1998, in the daytime ratings, Jerry Springer, for the first time, knocked Queen Oprah off of her throne. And Oprah fell to third in the ratings. And there was huge pressure on Oprah to go the trash TV route. So for Oprah, this was the wind of change. The whole industry was changing, everything around her was changing, and it was changing in a way that felt bad to her. So she found her tether. She didn't find it in the production companies or in ratings. She found it in her own authenticity. She took the time to get very clear about what was hers to do, not Rosie O'Donnell's to do or Ricky Lake or Jerry Springer. What was hers to do? And she came back the following season with an announcement that said that she was going to completely revamp her show. She was no longer going to do anything that would be harmful, that would be hurtful, that would put people on the spot, surprise them, or bring up any anger. She was only going to do motivational, feel-good shows. Well, all the pundits predicted that her show would be canceled in a year and that Oprah was washed up. I actually was doing research for this. I found some of the old headlines from the summer of 1998. It's pretty funny to look at now how they're predicting, well, it was nice while it lasted, but Oprah's gone down the drain. Well, we all know the end of the story. Oprah Winfrey has her own network, and she's been called the queen of all media, and all of her success since then, because she found the tether of her own authenticity when the winds of change blew. So when you're faced with the winds of change, take the time to find the God life in you, not necessarily something external that you think is spiritual or you think is how God wants you to react, but take the time to really find your personal tether and hold on, because that's what's going to get you through the winds as they blow. And that's what's going to keep you from blowing right over when they go. The second thing you want to do is you want to refine your destination. So often we're bipping along the road of life thinking that we're headed to our goal, and something messes it up. Something comes out of left field. That's what change is, right? Well, sometimes change is a way to say, do I really want to do this thing that I'm doing? In that same year, I find it funny. This is like walk down memory lane to 1998, people. But that same year, 1998, I was diagnosed with stage 4 lymphoma. And I had been on this path to get my PhD in history and be a college professor. I had it all mapped out. I had my life mapped out from that day until death. I was married. I was going to have more children, be a college professor, be a great mother, live happily ever after, retire from college, and, go live on a farm. I had it all planned out. But lymphoma kind of messed that up. That was out of left field. And that also then led to a divorce, which led to a complete career change. And I had to suddenly refine my destination. So when change happens, we have to look at, where are we going and does it still work? If you look at any vehicle, I've heard this analogy about boats. I've heard it about airplanes. I've heard about vehicles. While they look like they're going in a straight line from point A to point B, they're really zigzagging all over the place. A straight line is nothing more than a series of minuscule course corrections to keep us on track. And you guys know this, whenever you drive a car, you don't just put your hands on the wheel and go, you're always adjusting a little bit to stay within the lines, right? Same with a boat, same with a plane, same with anything. So that's a great metaphor for when change happens. We need to make those little course corrections and make sure that our destination is still where we really want to go. If you've heard me speak before at CSL Delaware, you might remember that I am a total Abraham Lincoln freak. I live in Gettysburg. I'm speaking to you from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. I don't know if you can see over my shoulder here, but I've always got Abe with me. He was a great example of this during the American Civil War. When the Civil War started, the goal of the Civil War was just to keep the Union together. That was it. Nothing to do with slavery, nothing to do with changing the Constitution, just keep the South from leaving and keep the Union together. That was the goal in 1861. We kind of forget that because it changed through the course of the Civil War, and it changed thanks to Abraham Lincoln. As Lincoln went down the path of the Civil War and he made his little course corrections, trying to figure out how to win the war, it became very clear to him that he could not win the war as long as slavery still existed, as long as there were two systems of labor and economics in these two halves of the nation, and as long as the United States had this gross hypocrisy with its own founding documents. And so while he was making these small series of course corrections, he had to refine his destination. About a year and a half into the Civil War, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, recognizing that there could be no slavery in a combined union. And later, halfway through the war at the Gettysburg Address, he articulated that by saying that now all men are created equal. And so in changing the course correction and doing the course correction for winning the Civil War, he redefined his destination. By the end of 1863, it was no longer just holding the Union together. It was holding the Union together with freedom as its cornerstone for all men and women. So when change hits us, I'm going to invite you to think about, as you make your course corrections, are you still going where you think you want to go? Sometimes that change is a way to tell you that the goal you had maybe didn't fit you. Maybe it wasn't right for you. Maybe it wasn't in alignment with your authentic tether. Maybe it was something that someone else told you you should want. And as change happens, you have the opportunity to refine what you think you want into something you really do want. Refine your destination, make those corrections. And that's one of the blessings of change. And then the last thing, when we're overwhelmed with change and struck by it, we don't want to look at it as a roadblock. We want to look at the winds of change as a turbine. You guys have all seen those big windmills, right? Without the winds of change, those big turbines wouldn't run. There is energy in that change. There is passion and power in that change. Whenever we have to strip ourselves of our comfort zone, whenever we have to strip ourselves of our habitual way of thinking and feeling, whenever we have to dig down under what we have always believed, there is this latent quantum energy that gets released in this burst that can propel us forward in a new way like we've never seen before. You guys can probably think of a million different examples of this in your own lives. If you got divorced, if you've been laid off of a job, if you've ever had anything that at the moment you thought was the end of the world, but then when it actually happened, you found yourself so much freer and lighter and more excited to go in a new direction. We have to remember that feeling when change starts. I think our knee-jerk reaction when the winds of change start to blow is to hunker down. But if we can remember that that wind is the energy that's going to drive us to our greater purpose, then we don't have to hunker down. We can welcome it and say yes and open ourselves to that wind of change. I was just reading a story about Malala. I hope you all know who that is because I'm not going to attempt her last name, but Malala. She's the Pakistani Nobel Peace Prize winner, young lady. She's 24 right now. For those of you who don't know her story very well, or maybe know who she is, but don't know why she's a big deal, she's a great example of using the winds of change as a turbine to propel her forward. She grew up in Pakistan. Her parents were both advocates for broad access to education. However, when Malala was born, the Taliban was in control of her region of Pakistan, and they were very selective about who could be educated, and women were not supposed to be educated. Well, Malala's parents had a series of private schools that they ran. They had like a chain of private schools that they ran, very small, kind of flew under the Taliban's radar. Yeah, thank you for posting in the chat. Someone just posted, Dean just posted Malala's story. So her parents kind of flew under the radar on these schools so that they didn't anger the Taliban. Malala was going to school and she started writing a blog about it. She started writing a blog about what it was like being an 11-year-old girl. She was 11 years old at the time, living in this Taliban ruled, very restrictive environment and trying to learn. She came to some prominence. She was nominated for several Pakistani Peace Awards. She became prominent in interviews with people like Desmond Tutu also being interviewed. And then the New York Times did a documentary on Malala. And all of this was well and good. She was 13, 14 years old. She was already prominent. But because of this, because of her prominence, the Taliban targeted her for an assassination attempt. And when she was 14, she was shot in the head by Taliban assassins. She took her about 3 weeks to recover enough to be moved out of Pakistan to the United Kingdom. She went to Birmingham, England, where she made a complete recovery. But she used that wind of change as a turbine. Now she has come to even greater prominence. She started the Malala Fund to help fund education. She wrote her autobiography, I Am Malala. She, in 2014, won the Nobel Peace Prize. She has been called the most influential teenager on the planet while she was still a teenager. I think she's been replaced now since she's in her 20s. But she became so influential and such an advocate for education in a way that she never could have been had she not sustained this injury and been a target of the Taliban. Now, I'm not suggesting that we all need to go out and get shot in the head to use the winds of change as a turbine. Certainly not. But when we have something change in our lives, how much smaller can it be when we can still use it to propel us forward to something greater? We can use that latent energy that the change has released in us as a springboard to the greater good, our greater good. Now, Malala used it as the greater good for humanity, but we can all use it as our greater good. And when we use it as the greater good for our progression forward, we are helping humanity, because each of us is here to give our unique gifts. And when we take whatever has changed in the external and use it as the catalyst to change in the internal, that's when we get to be that which we were here to be. So when the winds of change blow and you feel a little teetery tottery, you feel a little shaky, you feel like maybe you're not sure what your next steps need to be, and your instinct is to go and hide from the change. Your instinct is to revert back to the familiar and to cuddle up with, I always say I like to cocoon on my bed with a quilt and hot chocolate. That's kind of my first instinct when change comes. I think I spent all of March and part of April last year like that. But then when you're ready to break out of that, find your tether, find the tether of your own soul. I love that that Marianne is doing a class on the untethered soul. I'm actually using the opposite analogy, but the tether is our soul. Find your soul, find that constancy within yourself. What is yours to do? And then refine your destination. Is where you want to go still where you want to go? I can't tell you how many goal sheets I have, sacred covenants and goals and affirmations. I keep them in a file. And when I go back through them, I just laugh because things I thought I wanted, I don't really want. I never did. It was like, yuck. My mother wanted them for me, or somebody else wanted them for me, or I thought I was supposed to want them for myself. And by refining my purpose, by having something shake me up, made me refine my destination so that I could go where I really wanted to go, not where I thought everyone else wanted me to go. And then last, use that change as the turbine, as that generator of energy that's going to get you excited and passionate again. There's nothing like a little healthy terror of the change to get you back connected to what's really important and use that energy to propel you forward. So when the winds of change blow, open up your sails and allow them to take you where they meant for you to go. So let's pray with that. Let's join me. So let's just take a moment to breathe into that divine life, that divine power. And as we breathe, we go within. We go into that space that is uniquely each one of us. And yet that space that is universally connected to one another and to all life. And in this strange paradox, we recognize that as we are one with the divine, we are so perfectly unique. And so from that place of our unique universality, we just welcome whatever change may be happening right now, in the past, in the future. We embrace and know that change is always happening for our highest good. We believe in a benevolent God, and therefore we believe in a benevolent universe that never does anything to us, but always does everything for us. So I accept as universal law that whatever change is happening, it is to propel us to a greater good, a higher good, a more profound good, as defined by each of us individually. And so recognizing that this greater good is always at hand and that we are always one with it. I just accept for each of us that we move into this day, this week, this month, and this life with a new relationship to the winds of change. They can no longer blow us off course because we are in the captain's chair. We are absolutely navigating them, knowing that we are in touch with the truth of our own soul, recognizing that we refine our course as we go, and accepting that every change is a little way of quantum energy being released into our life to propel us forward to the next step. I know that each of us move forward into this next step in our lives with a renewed confidence, a renewed clarity, a renewed reliance on that one power. And I know for each of us that there is only good and more good always coming to us, because that is the truth. And that is how spirit operates, always, in all ways. And so it is with profound thanks that I just am grateful for this divine right action that is happening in each and every life. I am grateful for life unfolding. I am grateful for the presence of each person here, everyone on Zoom and on Facebook who has added their attention to this joyous co-creative experience in consciousness. And I am grateful for CSL Delaware that is such a beacon in the community, and in the community, the broader community of humanity. And so as we open our hearts to gratitude, gratitude for change, gratitude for evolution, gratitude for growth, we can release any concern or fear of change. We can release any need to stay in our comfort zone. We can release anything that no longer serves us. And we can just embrace the goodness, the knowingness, the gratitude that is life itself. And so with this, we can just claim our good. We can know that all is well, and we can say yes, and so it is. Thank you, thank you. And with that, I believe now it goes to Sharon.